Right, so I wanted to run through some of the actual investments that I'm going to be using to generate an income so that we can retire early and have all our bills paid for so that we don't have to work. Now, I've been experimenting with some income generating investments, but until I can actually access my SIP, I'm not going to be transferring everything over. Once I can access my SIP in March next year, I'll be splitting my investments 70-30, 70% in income generating investments and 30% in things like equities, where hopefully that will gain over a period of years. But before I do that, I just wanted to cover something which I think is important. I've said before that I've stress tested my modelling, my spreadsheets as much as I can. I'm not an expert with all of this stuff, but I've overestimated on all of our outgoings for living on a boat full time. I've overestimated on insurances, all of that sort of stuff. Now, luckily, our mooring fees are going to be very, very low. But what I did this morning is I thought, well, I'll just double check. Let's have a little look at the absolute worst case scenario, right? Now, it works out that we should be able to live on, with all of our outgoings and also accounting for caravan site fees if we went on holiday, although that's going to change and I'm going to cover that in a second. So all of our outgoings come to somewhere between £1,100 a month and £1,300 a month. Now, some might think that's low. Well, currently, I live in a property, a 3-bedroom house, which we've got a mortgage on. Our mortgage is over £700 a month. Now, if I took that out of the equation completely, we'd be left with outgoings of around £1,300 a month, which is what we're going to be expected to live on next year when we're living on the boat. So it's perfectly doable. And our income is also going to potentially go up, or at least stay the same. But what I wanted to do is I've stress tested with 10% inflation. I've averaged it out at about 5% inflation. It's lower than that. You know, they're saying that beef has jumped 27%. Other foodstuffs may not have jumped so much. So, you know, it's all swings and roundabouts, but I've allowed for 10% inflation. I've also allowed for a worst case scenario of only getting £50,000 equity in our property sale. Now, we reckon we should be able to clear £100,000 after all the fees and everything else. If we sold the house for and only got £50,000 equity, it would have to have sold £50,000 to £60,000 lower than every single property in our neighbourhood. So very, very unlikely. It just might take a little bit longer. But I reckon we should be able to clear over 50,000 equity. But I've modelled it this morning on 50,000 plus my 160,000, which is already more than that in my pension. So add that, that's 210,000. Take out what we need for the boat and other bits and pieces, let's say 40,000 completely. Once all of that's done, we should have around 180,000 in investments. Then what I did is I said, right, so 30% of those investments are going to gain around 8% year on year. I've been getting a lot more than that year on year, despite all of these crashes, the 2008 crash, the COVID crash, Trump's mucking about, all of that. I've still gained more than 8%. Then what I did is, although our outgoings are projected to be absolutely no more than £1,300 a month, what I've done is I've modelled it on £2,000 a month. £2,000 a month, we will struggle to spend that. Well, we wouldn't struggle to spend that if we had it, because everyone can spend money, right? But if we're sticking to budget, we should be on, £1,300, £1,100 to £1,300 a month. But I've allowed for £2,000 a month with zero income from investments and only the 30% invested in equities gaining. So that would mean I'd have to massively draw down every month the difference. Now, my wife has a personal pension of £400 a month, which goes up every year, but currently it's £400 a month. So if we based it on just that as our income, that's our only income, that's all we've got. And then I drew down literally from my pension every single month. And the worst case scenario on the house, high inflation, all of that, still be left with about £30,000 after 7 years, which is when my wife's state pension would kick in. And then that would cover all our outgoings anyway. But it's not going to be like that. We're going to get more than 50,000 on the house. We're pretty sure about that. I'm going to get some income. I'm already getting income from some of my investments. So of course I'll get income from the investments. The income from the investments is going to average out at around £500 to £600 a month. So even if we had to find, £300-400 a month, and we just took that from drawdown, it's not going to be a problem at all. And I have factored in that the income will drop. If we did need to draw down, then of course the income generating pot would reduce and our income would gradually go down. So it would kind of accelerate towards as the years go by. But I've accounted for all of that and it still works. We'd still end up with money in the pot at the end of the day. Not as much money as I'd like, but this is extreme modelling just to be absolutely safe. Now, I said I'd come back to talk about the caravan. We are now thinking that, because we'd like to go on holiday, we want to be living on the boat, but or spending a lot of time on the boat, but we also want to be spending time in the caravan, going around the country and going around Europe and just exploring and holidaying, because we're going to be free to do that. So we're now thinking, actually, what we could do is just get a cheap motorhome anyway. We were thinking about getting a motorhome, but a motorhome that doesn't have to be, absolutely plush inside and livable in, because we were talking about before living in a motorhome. This won't be something that we need to live in. It should be something that we can just drive around and stay in. And the reason for that is because then when we can travel all around Europe, all around the UK, we can park up pretty much for free at the roadside. If we want a bit of luxury, and I've accounted for this in the budget, then we could pay out for campsites, and I've accounted for that. I've actually accounted £150 a month for that, which we're not going to be holidaying that much, and we're not going to be using sites that much. We possibly would if we were in the caravan, but if we get a motorhome, then that would work out. So there's a couple locally that we're looking at. So this is not a definite. This is just an option, because it means then that we can holiday for pretty much free. Just have our food bill and groceries and petrol or diesel and no camping costs. So that's the idea. Now, as I said, I'm going to be looking at a 70-30 split. So 70% will be in income-generating investments that will hopefully be safe, that they won't drop if the markets drop. So if the markets were to suddenly do a 20% drop or 30, 40, 50% drop, they won't be affected. And they'll just pay an income regular despite that. Now, these investments will change the income that they pay if interest rates change, but I can then move them around, and I'll be on this daily. I know I will. And then the 30% will be in equities like the S&P 500. I've got a really nice investment with Fidelity, which has got like tech stocks. That's performed really, really well over the last 10 years. It's performed better than the general S&P 500 for my investments anyway. So I'll probably stick quite a high proportion in there of my 30%, and then I'll split the rest, some into maybe global equities, I'll stay away from UK just because, as I've explained before, it just doesn't work for me. The US markets tend to perform much better. Right, so one of the ones that I'm looking at currently, which is a 4.16% dividend yield, it pays quarterly. And that is the City of London Investment Trust. So it's got a mix of investments. We've got HSBC, Shell, Unilever, BAE Systems. What else we got? Banking, and also Tesco in there as well, which I'll talk about in a second. So that's the City of London investment. Then we've got the Royal London Short-Term Money Market. And that's doing quite well, actually. That gained a little bit, hasn't dropped, even during all the Trump tariff market scares where they have dropped a little bit. This has actually gained. So, and it's still it pays a monthly income, and I've had a couple of payments from it already, so that's really good, and that's just going into my SIP as cash. I'm just storing that up really, because I'm going to be taking my 25% tax-free lump sum, because I need that money to do a couple of bits on the house. We need some windows that need fixing. That's going to cost a few £100. We need a skip, stuff that I haven't got the money for at the moment. So we need to get access to my SIP, get that money, then we can finish the bits on the house and get the house on the market by probably end of April next year. That's what we're going to do. The Royal London Short-Term Money Market has, I've got quite a bit in there. I've got about 95,000 in there at the moment, and that's doing really well. It's gained a couple of £100, and that pays a monthly interest. And the interest rate on that currently there's a fee of 0.1%. It's gained about 4.5%. Last year was 5.4. Year before that was 4.3. So it's 4.57 this year. So it goes up and down. It's paid monthly. It's interest, sorry, not a dividend. So that will change according to Bank of England base rates. So if they change their rates, this will change. Then I've got an Aegon high yield bond, which I'm just trying out. That has lost £22, but I've only had £3,000 invested. It's lost £22, but that pays an income. That pays an underlying interest. The underlying yield is 7.42%, which was quite high. So what I'm doing is I'm just waiting for that to come through. So the ex-dividend date was the 1st of October. I should get paid that at the end of this month, 31st of October. And then I'll make sure that adds up to the 7.42%. Once I know exactly what that's paying, then I may put more into there. Because that's a higher rate, obviously, than the other stuff, but it's not as secure. The other thing going forward I was looking at was the Legal and General. I've just been keeping an eye on those shares. Now, I don't normally invest or look at investing in single shares. However, when we're looking for income and retirement, I want to kind of weigh up all my options. Now, I've been looking at the Legal and General share price, and it fluctuates a little bit. The dividend yield on there is 8.87%, and it's been that high, if not higher, for a long, long time. Despite everything pointing towards them not being able to afford to do it, they still do it. So, but their share price over the last year and even over a 5-year has varied between kind of £2.40 and £3, £3.20. It's about, say, about an 80p difference in their share price. Which I figured, if I was to buy, if I was to buy a lot of shares for that, to generate decent income, the fluctuation in their share price generally would not have lost me a great deal of money. And I'm thinking actually going forward that I need the income and I'll take the hit if the share price goes down. Yes, it'll be affected by things like the Trump tariffs, things like a downturn in the markets and that sort of stuff. But it certainly over the last 5 years, it hasn't dived at all. It's always picked itself back up, as do all the equities as well. So that might be something worth looking at. And the reason I talked about Tesco earlier as well, just to come back on that, was Tesco, being in the food industry, quite often performs well when there's market downturns. So as a hedge, that could be a good idea. It doesn't really pay much of a dividend though. Let's just have a little look on their dividend. Yeah, their dividend's about 3%, 3.09% dividend yield, which is not a lot, but I could use that as a hedge against the equities and also get some income from it. So that might be, and they pay twice yearly, I think. So that could be an idea. That's something I'm looking into. I'm watching the share prices. I'm doing some dummy modelling with my IG account on with dummy funds and just sort of checking things out there. But the idea there is to maximise income on my 30% that's going to be into equities. If I can get some of those generating income as well, albeit 3%, and it hedges against the other equities I'm invested in, it would definitely be very helpful to do it that way. And Tesco's performed very well. What I'm doing, I'm in the process of developing, I've not come across this anywhere else, but I'm developing where I'm doing editing for videos, right? You get involved with colour wheels when you're colour grading videos and things like that. I digress here. But what I was going to do is I'm trying to generate like a colour wheel that will have opposites. So you'll have things like, Tesco in the food industry tends to perform well against technology. So if technology goes down, then food industry goes up and vice versa. And then you have other opposites like, renewables and green technology tends to go up, or like when the oil price goes up, renewables tends to go up. So they sort of complement each other. So there's opposite ends of the spectrum that I'm going to be looking at hedging one off against the other so that hopefully things will even out. So if there was a downturn in the equities, then I'm cushioned a little bit as best I can against it. That's the idea. Because of course I want as much money after 7 years, when my wife gets her pension, her state pension, that coupled with her personal pension will actually pretty much cover everything we need. But after that 7 years, I want as much of my invested money still left as possible. Because then, if we are finding it a bit hard on the boat or we want to, move into a flat or something like that, then we'll have the income backing us up to do that. Not only will we'll have the income to do it, we'll have the available funds to start drawing down off of until my pension comes in the next 7 years. So for those that have commented before about ETFs, yes, I am looking into ETFs as well. They will go on the equity side, they won't go on the income side because they are subject to market drops. The actual income generating side of things, the 70%, needs to be not fluctuating. That needs to be steady as a rock while the equities are doing their thing. The equities, the 30% there, is there that over the years, averaged over the years, will gain sort of 8% or more in my case, but to cushion that pot if I did have to draw anything down off the 70%. And that's what I'd do, is if for some reason, our outgoings were more than expected, any drawdown would only come from that 70%, wouldn't come from the equities. Because what you don't want to be doing is put into a position where in a downturn you're cashing in equities at a loss or at a low price, which is not the way to do it. So that's the plan going forward. And what I'll do is I will go through in detail exactly how I've got that set up once we'll start doing this probably as soon as I access it next year and I can get the income paid to me either into an ISA or into a bank account as an income, then I'll show you all of that and I'll demonstrate that actually happening. But that's the plan so far. As I said, that doesn't account for any other income, anything like that at all. Some of you have mentioned, YouTube channel. Is the YouTube channel going to be paying you in retirement? I'd like to think so, but I'm going to be covering that on a video soon, just to let you know why I haven't really included that for the moment. But hopefully you'll find that interesting. So that will be coming up, and we're also looking at getting my wife's some of my wife's work published on Kindle and on Kindle publishing soon, which is really exciting. So we'll see how that goes too. And again, these are all things that I would enjoy doing in retirement, right? So next year when we're living on the boat, making a film of me having coffee and feeding the ducks is not going to be work for me, right? It's not going to be hard work. So, but the thing is, I won't be relying on doing that. I'll just be doing that for fun, as I am really now. I'm just documenting what we're doing. That's all I'm doing. I'm not telling anyone that they should be doing this. We're not giving any advice. The only advice I would ever give on this channel really is, if you've got a plan and you've got something exciting that you really want to do in life, then just do it. Just go for it. If your numbers add up, your numbers may not be like my numbers. At the end of the day, we're doing what we're doing because we feel it's right for us. And that's it. And then we're just documenting that. And if you'd like to follow that, then, if you haven't already, please subscribe. And also, for those that do want to support us financially, we have the members option where I give early access to most of the videos that I put up. And also for the Channel Insider membership, I've got some behind the scenes videos and more in-depth videos for members only as well. On the membership side, I wanted to cover this in the next video about YouTube in general in a little bit more detail, but just so that you know, if you don't decide to join as a member, you won't. You'll still get the same great content that I'm going to be planning to put out, that I plan to put out every week. The membership option is for those who want to support the channel a little bit more. All right, you're supporting the channel by just watching my videos. Honestly, if you want to subscribe, that's even better. That's great. It just means you won't miss out on future content. But my videos going forward, although I'll have membership only videos, those are completely separate. That will not affect the quality and the timing and the quantity of videos that I'll be putting up on the main channel. So I'm still going to be covering my whole journey on the channel. It's just that little bit extra that people are supporting the channel financially with that little bit extra. So of course I wanted to give some extra back. That's all that's about. Just to make that absolutely clear. I don't think I made that clear before. So all our current members, thank you so much. Thank you very much for your support. Thanks everyone who's watching the videos and supporting us with super thanks. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one.